Joined by Bryan Munson of Husker Online and On 3. Bryan, how's it going today?
Hey, what's going on?
Hey, not too much. We're excited for another round of Husker recruiting news, and it's been a busy week, a couple weeks for Nebraska. I think we start with the quarterback position with Daniel Kalin, of course, decommitting from Missouri, quickly going to Nebraska. What kind of play did this for Nebraska? And I know also he's got an Elite 11 invitation, which Nebraska fans have been through that before, and maybe want to know, hopefully that's not some sort of curse, because of course Patrick O'Brien and Johnny Stanton didn't necessarily turn out for Nebraska.
Yeah, no, the Daniel, that happened in pretty short order. So obviously Raiola, he committed to Georgia like last Monday. And I think as soon as that happened, Nebraska was like plan in motion for, to go back and get Daniel Kalin, back in the picture. I think things were pretty well laid out, for Nebraska with Daniel Kalin about, look, this is the number one quarterback in the country. We have to go ahead and give pursuit here. Hopefully you understand. The minute that this guy tells us that this is not going to happen, between us and him, we're right back here. We're going to tell you that you're our guy. And it's going to take us a second to kind of, either pull him in and tell you about it, or, move on from him and come back and re-engage you. So I think Nebraska, once they got the word that Raiola was a Bulldog, they were at Bellevue West, and it was, they showed up there, I think, at least twice. I think there were as many as 3 different coaches that went out to see him last week. And he had decommitted, I think it was a little bit sooner than when he announced. I think he announced it on Thursday. I think he might even decommitted sooner in the week, to be honest with you, and finally went public on Thursday, and then committed to Nebraska publicly on Saturday. Look, it came down to him having to be a very mature individual and be able to put behind him any type of bad feelings he had about Nebraska, not making him the priority number one, and, being able to kind of come back and put that aside and, decommit from Missouri from a school that he had been committed to for over 2 months. So I think it comes down to, being a homegrown, Nebraska fan. And that was a place he always dreamt of kind of going and playing. And finally he had a committable offer and had the opportunity to go ahead and join the class. So great get for Nebraska. Obviously, like you said, an Elite 11 guy. Hopefully it does turn out better than O'Brien and Johnny Stanton. But I think that people are going to be really impressed with what you see from Kalin. He's a makes quick decisions, good decisions. He's a pretty unflappable dude. He doesn't get too high, too low about good things or bad things happening on the field. He's a real great extension of the coaching staff, actually, is the way I would kind of frame him up. But the other thing too is that the latest guys, other than Raiola, that they've been short, they've been small, they've been undersized. Kalin is not. Kalin's a 6'3" legit guy, and that's another thing that I just kind of go back to from seeing him in person on February. I was really amazed with his build, and I think that's going to have a lot of things. It's going to help him out with playing in the Big Ten.
Do you think it's kind of interesting? Do you think that he could be a guy that would run something similar to what they do with Jeff Sims? Or do you think, Jeff Sims more of a mobile quarterback? People kind of want to know, is that something that they're stuck with or stuck to? Or they just, did they choose Daniel Kalin because he was the best player available?
I think Nebraska chose Daniel Kalin because he can throw the football around. And I think Nebraska has to go ahead and get a little bit more mobile right now because, number one, I think even if people believe what Matt Rule is saying about the offensive line being a good group and best group that he's been around or whatever, and I think we would all kind of agree that having that mobility aspect to the quarterback position is kind of an X factor, and it allows Nebraska to get creative with making the quarterback a designed runner. It also adds that ability to kind of, take it down and run at any one moment, when he's dropping back to make a pass. And I think that's something that kind of adds that extra dimension. And I think that with Kalin, you are finding yourself with more of a traditional kind of pocket passer But he's not a statue. He doesn't have just the feet stuck in concrete. He can pull it down and he can run it. And I think that you can not necessarily have the label of dual threat, but you can be athletic and strategically know when you should go ahead and pull down the ball and run it, or be able to diagnose that. I mean, I don't think anybody would call Patrick Mahomes a dual threat guy, but he can shred some defenses when it comes to, them putting an inadequate spy on him, or not giving him the right kind of, the right kind of look to kind of hold him in the pocket and hold him there, or putting too many guys into coverage and not enough guys to kind of get pressure on him. I think Kalin is going to see that, understand it. He's an intelligent guy. I think you can strategically ask him, 3, 4, 5 times a game, tuck it, run it, keep the defense honest, and kind of do those things. But I don't think you're going to see him doing a lot of designed runs like you might see with Sims or a Harburg or even like a Purdy who's already on the roster.
There's so many different things that make you kind of questions and avenues to go based off this commitment. Of course, one of them is his teammates there at Bellevue West, Davon Hall and Isaiah McMorris. I mean, you got to believe this can't hurt to get those guys. Did Nebraska feel like a front runner for those guys now?
I thought that Nebraska's in a really good really good shape for. I think I feel the best with McMorris. I mean, if you really kind of dive into where things are at with Hall, the first thing that pops out is that Hall hasn't even been to Lincoln since Rule became the head coach. That stands out to me. I mean, he's obviously been putting a lot of time into 7-on-7 throughout the spring. But I think that, that extra visit that McMorris made kind of out of cycle, out of phase, when he just called Nebraska up to see if Coach McGuire was there, wanted to go down and meet him earlier on in the spring, was such a great positive sign for Nebraska. And I think things sit really a lot better with McMorris, but I think things can really improve with Hall. And I think that they've improved steadily, over the last month or so with Coach McGuire having a chance to kind of work with Hall and McMorris to kind of improve things and shore things up there. I think they both, have committable offers and just, are kind of waiting to kind of go through the process. I think Hall has got his eyes kind of, into the SEC a little bit more than maybe McMorris, kind of having his eyes out west, looking at USC and an offer that he has there. I just feel like things have always kind of been better with McMorris for some reason, but I think this definitely improves Nebraska's position with both.
Well, quickly, we'll stay in state, too, because there's a few other guys. Of course, Carter Nelson, one that has seen his kind of rankings rise over the last couple of days. Also, we haven't talked too much about with you about Caleb Pyfrom and Caleb Benning. Are those guys that Nebraska has offered? Are those guys that are as in-state guys, are those guys that you would expect maybe to join the class at some point?
Yeah, let's talk about Pyfrom first because he's coming in that first weekend in June. So that's June 2nd. Caleb Pyfrom will be in to take his official visit. Kind of quietly, Pyfrom's kind of in the background, taking some visits, seeing some places, and he's set some things up very, very quickly to get in to see Lincoln. It's not been one of these things kind of build with anticipation, and that first weekend in June is kind of unique. It's mainly a bunch of defensive backs and skill position guys with the exception of Caleb Pyfrom and Carlin Jones. And Pyfrom, obviously, there must be something that doesn't work with him to come in the weekend of the 23rd, because that's really been the weekend that all the other in-state guys are kind of setting up on, like Carter Nelson, who you also asked about. He'll be in Nebraska the weekend of the 23rd. I think it really helps, obviously, that Kalin, if it's not Raiola, that it's Kalin that's becoming the quarterback in the 2024 class. I think that, things are pretty well set for Georgia at tight end now. They just picked up Riddell last night, the number 1 tight end in the nation. They have a second tight end that they just picked up a week before from Florida. I would say that they're done. I'd say the biggest 3 threats that Nebraska should be feeling for Carter Nelson to keep him home are going to be Notre Dame, Alabama, and Auburn. I think that those are really the 3 schools that people need to keep an eye on with him. I think he's really got a soft spot for Notre Dame, and I think he likes the consistency of those SEC schools in Alabama. And Caleb Benning, honestly, I don't think he's set up an official visit yet. I need to catch up with him to kind of figure out where things are kind of sitting at with him. I think it's kind of interesting, obviously, that Nebraska has a great number of DBs coming in. He may be in that week, and I just have not had a chance to kind of catch up with him yet to kind of talk to him about it. But I think that Nebraska obviously still looks very good with the remaining prospects. Rizak obviously being committed to Notre Dame. I think Ingwerson will take an official visit to Nebraska, even though he has one scheduled to Pitt and is committed to Pitt. So keep a close eye on that one. If he does take that official to Nebraska, I might go ahead and tell you that you have another Daniel Kalin potentially in the class as an in-state guy that's going to flip on another commitment.
Wow. And what is he projected at the next level? I know he's kind of listed as an athlete, but 6'7", 235 seems like maybe a lot you could do there.
Oh, he's got a great. So if Kalin impressed me because he was 6'3", Ingwerson was the most physically impressive that I saw of all the players that day at Warren Academy in Omaha. He was 6'7", 245. I think that there's a lot of things that you can do there with him. I think that could be an offensive tackle in weight. And I think that's one of the things that Nebraska's kind of got their eyes on, because he is a good athlete as a tight end, as an offensive weapon, but as an offensive tackle, if you have those feet and that athleticism, and you can go ahead and add some additional size to that and can kind of play that offensive tackle position, that's incredibly marketable. It's one of those things you kind of need as a basis to be successful at the position. And I think that would be very, very handy for him, obviously, to kind of consider, where offensive tackles are kind of viewed at and whether or not he can become one of those elite guys.
I mentioned offensive tackle. Nebraska reached into the portal this week and getting Tyler Knack from Utah. Is that a guy, he didn't play at Utah. Is that more of a kind of along the Jacob Hood lines of maybe having him develop, or is he a guy that could play right away?
I do. I think there's an obvious, need for bodies at the offensive tackle and along the offensive line in general. I mean, I can't remember a spring ever where the offensive line had to kind of split between both units during the spring game. I mean, it goes to show you, that they are just so thin at those spots. But I mean, as far as like upside, you had a guy that went ahead and went through a year at the D1 level at Utah. Very overlooked program with the amount of success that they've had. They beat USC last year with Kincaid as the tight end, obviously. It's one of those programs I think that gets overlooked very, very a lot, very easily. And I think that's it's a great sign when you had a team like that, get an in-state kid and then that kid's kind of moving on. With the potential, I feel like Nebraska feels like is there. He's just down a redshirt year. He's going to have 4 years of eligibility. You just need to kind of get him on campus and start tapping into it a little bit. I think that he's sold on, obviously, the paper thin kind of depth chart that's there for offensive line, and I think he's sold on the situation that kind of is there in front of him. He can come in there and put himself in a position to maybe not start, but get some meaningful time playing the offensive tackle position in the Big Ten. So that's really a good thing. It's going to be interesting to see, and he's got better size than what we can list on On3 too. I think he told us he was 6'7", 320. So he's really got some good size too there. So I'm very interested to kind of see where his conditioning is at, how quickly he can kind of pick things up. Where he's kind of at when we start talking about the beginning of fall camp. If he's a name that they're talking about, 2 weeks into fall camp, it's going to be interesting to see what the season can kind of mean with him being there now on the roster.
All right, and final question, just kind of resetting things for Husker fans as they look at this as we getting ready for camp season. Usually have a few commits throughout the summer. They have 7 commits now. Is there a number that Nebraska fans should hope to be getting to? Maybe by the end of the summer, maybe through these camps. I guess what are we looking for with these camps in the next couple months?
Yeah, the camps are interesting because I think that I think Nebraska has a pretty good hold on what's going to happen with the 2024 group. I imagine that they're going to try to bring in close to 30 players on official visits during that time, and I think that the camps will obviously, bubble up all of the names of the guys that are capable of playing at the D1 level at Nebraska. But I really would pay more attention to those 25 and 26 type of guys that are out there that are going to be juniors and sophomores. I think the 2024 group, Nebraska feels like they kind of understand like where they sit at with a number of things. And between the camps and between the official visits, I think Nebraska, being at 7, maybe being a class that could touch 20, they might want to get to 13 or 14. I mean, we're already confirming guys, into the month of September for official visits. There's 3 guys that I confirmed last night that'll be there in September between I think the 16th and the 30th. So first home game and I think the second or the third home game for Nebraska. But I think that's roughly the number where I think Nebraska would want to be at when you start coming out of the middle of July. Want to be at 13, want to be at 14. And I think that you would want to then kind of grab that last third or a little more of your class during the season as it kind of goes on a little bit. And obviously that class size can grow. We've all seen it kind of happen and evolve based on attrition and how things are going to kind of play out with the 85 rule.
It's our weekly tradition here on the Ticket Water Cooler. Bryan Munson of Husker Online and On3. Bryan, thanks again for taking time out of your day.
All right, guys. Be good.